Well, good afternoon. Thank you for that response. There's a tradition in African American culture called call and response, antiphonal response. So when one puts out a call, one expects a response, so thank you. Welcome to the Dr. Peter Conover Studio dedication event. My name is Mark McPhail, and I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Communication. You've seen a lot of the new updates and changes to the studio, and while I'd like to take credit for that, I really can't. That's been the work of my predecessors, Dr. John Heyer and Dr. Richard Haven. So I'd like to ask that we acknowledge them and the hard work that they've done that's led up to this event. And I'd also like to thank Katie Kuznasik, Alicia Bade, Tracy O'Mara, and Dr. Kim Hickson, who will be your MC today. And I'd like to acknowledge them also. Well, you've seen a lot of the new additions, but you haven't yet seen the most recent one. And next year, when our students come back, they'll see it as well. And they're going to say, who is Dr. Peter Conover? And someone is going to say, well, he's a teacher. Since 1973, he served the university, the college, and the students through dedication and commitment and service. And then someone else will say, he's a husband. And he and Catherine have contributed to our students' success through their generosity, and again, through their service. And then someone else will say, he's a father. And his sons, Aubrey and Damien, are responsible for this dedication. And those students will know what all of us know here today, that Dr. Peter Conover is a teacher and a father and a husband. And more important than that, they will know that he has given us a legacy that helps us recognize that we are all part of something greater than ourselves. Please join me in recognizing the Conover family for their generosity, their service, and their integrity. As a communications scholar and teacher and student, I've always been told that the one most important rule in communication is be brief. So I'm going to end here and hand this over to my colleague, Dr. Kim Hickson, Chair of the Department of Communication.
Thank you, Dean McPhail, for that introduction. It's always tough to follow such an outstanding speaker as he is. He's really talented when he gets up to talk. I am Kim Hickson, Chair of the Department of Communication, and maybe a lot of folks don't really realize it, but the TV station is kind of a partnership between the Department of Communication and Residence Life here on campus. The TV station Peter helped get going back in 1980, and just to give you a little bit of an idea of what life was like back then, some of the great movies, and Peter is a great movie aficionado, and I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of classic movies with Peter and Catherine over at their house. It's a real treat. But just to put this in historical perspective, The Empire Strikes Back was a big movie back in 1980. Airplane was. Ordinary People and 9 to 5. Top movies back then. You know, in history, Jimmy Carter was the president. He lost the election that year to Ronald Reagan. J.R. Ewing was shot. That was the big news of the year. And you know, you had to mention what was on television at the time. The Dukes of Hazzard, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island. So is it any wonder that here at UW-Whitewater they decided, let's put a TV station on the air? And in helping Peter do that was the director of Residence Life. And it's now my honor to introduce to you Jerry Gorby.
Thank you for that kind invitation to come to this great occasion. In 1979, I was director of housing here on the campus, and I was attending a program at Penn State University. And while I was there, I noticed all these cameras around also at that convention. And I started asking around that it was put on by the Residence Life Department. I felt, my goodness sakes, why can't we do that at Whitewater too? You know, so I came back here and talked to my boss, who at that point was Dr. David Marquis, and he says, well, it's a good idea, and let's take a step and find out who would be great to get that program started. And by golly, that evening, I was talking to my two daughters, Tina and Tricia, and they said, you know, we attended this program at the university, and it was called, I can't think of the name of it now, but I think it was called Campus for the Kids. Is that correct, Peter? College for the Kids. Yeah. And they attended it, and they said it was Peter Conover who ran that program, and they said it was an excellent program, and we had a great time with it. Well, I said, Peter is still on the staff, and I said, I'm going to contact him. So I did. And so Peter and I sat down, and we went over some of the thoughts that I had and some of the things that he came up with, which were tremendous. And so we pulled it together, and he started planning on being the director of our cable TV department at that time. And we put him in that position, and he did an excellent job. But with all excellent jobs, there's a price to pay. Peter came up to me about a week later and said, we need to get a camera. And I said, well, can't you do the program without one? No. He said, we need a camera. And I said, well, what's the cost of that camera? Well, I about fell out of my chair, you know, when he told me. But he says, we probably in the future will need more than one. So at that point in time, I had to revise my budget. The Residence Hall Life budget was such a good program that we had enough money in it to revise the budget, to put in enough cameras and equipment and so on to make that program go. Peter took it from there. I can't believe how he took it from there. This program here is one of the top ones in the United States. And thank you, Peter, for doing that. I also noticed that he has a couple of friends, Jeff Kohlmeyer and Greg Marty, who have also helped him tremendously in that whole program. But you know, a couple of ideas that he had, he says that after 2 years, he says, we need a truck. And I said, a truck? What do we need a truck for? Well, we have to go on the road to these other campuses so that we can televise and take our equipment out there and bring the programs back to the campus here. Oh boy. So here we buy a truck. Well, since then, they've bought 3 trucks altogether. Is that right, Peter? 2 or 3. But all the time, you know, we are concerned about the students, the faculty and the staff, and of course, the merchants in town. And Peter sent a group of the students who worked here at the station into town to bring them up here and show them what we were doing, so that he could go back and ask them if they would like to advertise on the cable TV network. He brought them up here to a wine and dine reception. I don't think Peter realized at the time that alcohol was not allowed on campus. And just then, the Chancellor Conover was walking by, happened to see the wine and cheese plates and so on, picked up the cheese plates and a couple crackers and moved on. Didn't say a word about the wine at all. It was also quite interesting as we started looking at the different programs that he wanted to have. Sports was probably the first one that we encountered a lot of pressure to do, whether it was football or basketball or any of the other sports, and so we did them. Not only televised the home games, but also televised the away games. And that took a lot of work. A lot of people, students primarily, that were in that program. We also did public and campus announcements, training films for RAs. We also did residence hall programs, what's happening at the fitness center, which we had 2 fitness centers in the residence halls, one in Wells Hall and one in Drumlin Hall, and events at the Center of the Arts. All of them were, started off small, but gained in popularity as they went on. We also had other shows that Peter was really proud of. And I'll name a couple of them. One called The Dating Game. One called The Roommate Game. Then there's a third one here called The 25-Cent Peep Show. I never have heard from Peter what that entailed. And it was on such late nights that I didn't watch it. And then they had the late night with the residence life staff. That was a program that what happens late at night in a residence hall. Now, you and I know what happens in those halls, but I'm not going to put it on TV. But certainly the whole experience was a real life experience for a lot of the people who were involved with the productions in cable TV. And I want to thank you very much for doing that for the Residence Hall Life program.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, the TV station started around 1979, 1980, but Peter actually came here to UW-Whitewater back in 1972. And joining Peter in coming to Whitewater around that time is our next speaker. And that is the former chair of the communication department, former associate dean of the college, and former interim dean of the College of Arts and Communication, Dick Haven.
We've got a wireless mic and it's working, so I'm going to step a little closer if I may. Now, being a communication professor, of course, I have to have 3 points of analysis. All right? We know that. And actually, I'm going to. My first one is called, the 3 are spring break. The second one is department meetings and other earthquakes. And the third one is New Horizons. Now, as Kim noted, I arrived in August of 1972 and met this new guy who also arrived at the same time, and his wife, Catherine. And so here we are, along with a few other folks who were hired by Terry Ostermeyer, who was the department chair at that time. And, you know, I knew he had high hopes for us. He didn't know what we were going to do to him, but he had high hopes for us. So we started out together at a time when Richard Nixon is president. The Vietnam War is still going. And the idea of a computer is that off in some building, it's gigantic. All right. You know, you think about technology at the time. I was excited to have an electric typewriter. That was high-level technology. So a lot of things were going to change. So let's go to my first point. It was called spring break. And I've got some photos up here. I hope you can see them, because it's going to take Peter and Catherine back. We were these two new faculty members, and we were teaching here in Wisconsin, which, like this year, had this really cold spring. And we sat along with Roger Wimmer, and Roger is the third guy in the top photo on the left, on your right. He was also hired that year to teach the basic course like me, and we all decided we're going to go to Florida. So we hopped in Roger's car and drove 24 hours for spring break in Florida. Now, Catherine claimed that she couldn't join us and would fly down later. I think that was an excuse to stay out of a car with three guys for 24 hours. But in any case, there'll be more to that part of the story. In the photos, you will notice that we're in Florida, and one of the first places we stopped was this new park. And it was only 2 years old, and that was Disney World. And we spent a day at Disney World. In only the Magic Kingdom, there was no other parts at that time. Well, then we went to stay with Peter's brother, and I began to learn more about Peter, because he said we can stay with his brother in this little house in inland Florida. So we go in, and the two things I remember from that visit were frogs everywhere. It was that time of the year. And the fact that his brother, as soon as we got there, rushed us out to the backyard and said, "You got to try my new pistol." So we're all firing his handgun into the woods. You know, now we have to go back and sleep in this house. This was not of little concern. You know, I learned later that Peter was not only pretty good with a handgun, but he also was very good with a shotgun. And he and John Cease, who was a longtime faculty member who's now deceased, would often go skeet shooting. And so actually, this is something that was a hobby of Peter's, and he was probably a lot more comfortable with that handgun than I was. Well, after Florida, we headed for New Orleans. And we were going to tour New Orleans, and, you know, young faculty having a good time on spring break, and that's when Catherine flew down to join us. And lo and behold, she gets there and announces there's a death in the family, we have to fly out. Now, I think that was another excuse to avoid the drive back from New Orleans to Whitewater. But, you know, we started out that way. We had a great time. We were young, new faculty, just getting used to the new situation. And it was great to have this opportunity to do some different things on spring break and actually have some money for once. Now, my second point is called department meetings and other earthquakes. Well, you know, I never caused trouble. But Peter always caused trouble in department meetings. This may surprise some folks because he's so mild-mannered, so easygoing. But, you know, as soon as he came on board, he actually did what he'd been hired to do. He started proposing new courses in television, in electronic media. And this upset some of the older faculty. They said, "What are you doing? You're changing our major." And they started yelling at him, suggesting he was a radical. And we did have some earthquakes in those department meetings when Peter got yelled at. And you know what? I've never seen a faculty member that young who took it that well and went right on doing what he ought to do and built his program very well. You know, it's a compliment to Peter that he had the demeanor, the fortitude to handle some of that and yet keep going and keep building and keep positive. Now, the other part of the earthquake was Peter, you know, would take me on these trips. We went to Florida and I got to shoot a handgun. We went to San Francisco in the late 80s for the National Communication Convention, which was 1 month after the big San Francisco earthquake. Well, Peter had been in San Francisco before. I'd never been there. We had Darrell Mullins, who was another young faculty, and Pat Townsend with us, who we lost this year. And, of course, Peter wanted to show us all the city. And so at one point, we were walking under the elevated highway that had been closed and declared, a disaster. Now, I'm not sure why we were walking under it, because you could see where it had separated in the earthquake. But Peter wanted us to see that. So we got a chance to see San Francisco from a different viewpoint than many folks at that circumstance. We also had a pretty good time in the wine country. Well, my third point is new horizons. And one of the things that I think is a hallmark of a great faculty member is their ability, no matter how long they've been at the job, to always want to grow and change. In my work, as I left the department, I was working, I think at that time as associate dean, and I was working with the chancellor, Chancellor Miller, and Chancellor Miller said to me, Dick, I'd really like us to do live television programming of sporting events. And he asked me to take over the project and see if I could find a way to marry our TV program to Charter Communications. And this meant meeting with Charter Communications to convince them that they ought to lay the wiring to enable us to go live. The things that Jerry talked about were all taped. And we didn't have the ability to go remote live until we had the actual wiring hookups. We didn't have any kind of satellite capability. Peter was going to ask Jerry for that. That's a satellite truck that cost about $150,000, but he probably never got around to it. All right. So I approached Charter, and then I approached Peter and said to him, here's what we want to do. Now, keeping in his frame of mind that he had with Jerry, the first thing he said is, Dick, I need more equipment and more money. And you know what? What was beautiful, though, was that here was a new horizon. This was going to be an adventure we've never had before, and Peter worked hard to make it happen. And he got some new equipment, which we got from Charter Communications. But Charter Communications pumped in over $100,000 to wire the campus, hook it up, and arrange to run the programming, including helping to increase some of our programming in the area of instant replay. So we had a marriage there, and Peter worked hard to make it happen. The last new horizon that hit Peter, and this is late in his career, was the decision that we wanted to develop a multimedia major, now known as our gaming major. And Peter played a critical role, even though he knew that if that major succeeded, it would take students away from television, which it did. But it really was the next stage in video production. And he was a key player in making that new major come on board. What else can you ask of a faculty member who happens to be around for about 40 years and maybe thinking about retirement than to see them always step up to the next challenge, the next new horizon, and make it happen? I'll tell you, whether I was department chair or associate dean or dean, it made my work a lot easier, a lot more fun, and a lot more exciting. So Peter, whether it was spring break in Florida or the earthquake in San Francisco, or most importantly, your work as a colleague and all the things you did, thank you for making my work better and this university a great place.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our former Dean of the College of Arts and Communication, my friend John Heyer.
Thank you, Tim. Normally I would stand at a lectern and read from notes. I have a little prequel to share with you. I was at my computer last night about 7 o'clock preparing my notes, because as the communication faculty know, I don't like to speak in front of them extemporaneously, having not had the training that they have in speaking extemporaneously. So almost precisely at 7 o'clock, I had an allergy attack out of the blue, unlike any I've had in my life. And I immediately became illiterate. I could neither read nor write. So I was unable to finish my notes. And then this morning I found myself in Dr. Theeney's office for an emergency eye procedure. So I can't see you very well right now. Are you still there? I think I'll take these off because they're not doing any good. I thought perhaps I shouldn't come, but I did feel that I wanted to share some words about Peter Conover with you. And I decided that I would speak extemporaneously and take the chances. When I came here in 1997, Peter had already served this university for 25 years. He already had the university rocker that I could never hope to earn. And one of the things that a new dean needs to do quickly when you come on a scene such as, in my case, I had been a dean elsewhere for 10 years, but here I was with new faculty, people I didn't know, and an agenda that needed to move forward. And one of the things one has to do quickly is to determine who on the faculty commands such respect that you can turn to them for some of the most important tasks. Dean Haven mentioned the multimedia program that we began at that time, or we proposed at that time. It actually took some time to get it through. And we did turn to Peter Conover to chair that committee, to work with the faculty, because he was one of those individuals who could achieve consensus and move the agenda forward. That wasn't the only thing that he did during my time as dean. I turned to him for, again, one of the most important tasks, and that was for forging our college personnel constitution, so to speak, our personnel rules. And that's the background framework against which all the departments needed to write their personnel rules. Now, that's a task that for many people is very thankless. For the faculty who work on it, certainly for the chair of the committee, because it happens, it's put in place, and you know, there's no one saying, well, the Thomas Jefferson of this was Peter Conover. Or I should say James Madison. It really was a very important task, and Peter carried that to conclusion, working with divergent interests in order to accomplish it. That was the kind of faculty member he was. There were many other instances that I turned to him, and there were certainly many that my predecessors turned to him. When I arrived, there was just a tremendous group of faculty that I found to work with. I see Terry Ostermeyer here, and I certainly recall the late Pat Townsend and the roles that they played in helping to build the college and the departments. I can say this, that at the time they were tied up with other tasks. Peter, all he was doing was running a television station. He had all kinds of spare time. So I don't know why it is that we turned to Peter and found that he had the time and the wherewithal and the ability to accomplish these other tasks in service. As you know, he won the departmental, the college, and the university service award during his time here. I'm tremendously grateful for what he did. And I want to thank him for sharing his whole career with the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And I also now want to thank the family for doing what they are doing to add to that legacy and to enable these studios to be named for Peter, and also to support the programs here. So, thank you. Thank you.
I came here to UW-Whitewater in 1995, and I interviewed for the job. Dick was the department chair then, and I was offered the job and turned it down that first year. And when I was here interviewing, I got to spend probably about an hour with Peter, talking about the department and just talking about Whitewater, just talking about lots of things in general. I came back the next year in 1996. The job was still open, and I'd liked Whitewater. I just wanted to work on my dissertation for a while. And I came back, and I got to sit down with Peter again. And I said to Peter, how's Aubrey? And Damien, I couldn't remember you, but I mean your name. And Peter helped me out and said, Damien. And, Peter said, oh, fine. And he looked really shocked that I had remembered that he had these two sons and that I could remember one of them's name. And, the reason was because when I was here in 1995, and I was talking with Peter, and as I said, we talked about a lot of things, and we got around to talking about family. I don't remember exactly what it was he said about you, but he said it with such feeling and with so much pride and with so much love in his heart for you. And it was just so easy to see how very, very proud he was of the two of you. And, you know, that stuck with me, and I remembered it a year later when I came back. And, you know, when Peter talks about you, and he's talked about you a lot since then, those Irish eyes really start dancing. And he really... he's really proud of his sons, and I know he's proud of you today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Peter and Catherine's sons, Aubrey and Damien Conover.
Great, thank you, and thanks everybody for coming out today. It's so wonderful to see everybody gather and reflect on my dad's career. It's great to be here where the old Weeping Willows used to be. As a kid, I used to play in the Weeping Willows and swing, and it was just a lot of fun. And you know, well, I'm very honored to be helping to endow this studio for next generations. I also like to reflect back on what I think is potentially even more important than that, and it's what my dad's teaching meant for me as a lifelong student. And as I've talked to my friends who have taken my dad's coursework, the different skill sets that were really communicated to them and shared with them. And you know, when I think about some of the great characteristics and skill sets that my dad has taught me over the years, you know, I reflect on several. I reflect on the ability to communicate, to have a great sense of humor, and to think about things strategically. And I want to just take a moment to talk about this last point, because it's something that I think has really helped me over my life, and that's thinking about things strategically. So when I was young, we used to play a lot of different games. We would play Pente, chess, Kala, all sorts of games. And each one would be, you know, a different way to think about things strategically. And there was also, we used to play a lot of card games. And there's one card game in particular. I just want to share a little bit more about this card game, because it is emblematic of something larger. So it's a poker game, and it's called High Low Declare. And it is a 7-card game. And throughout the hands, you're betting your chips, and at the end, you decide to make either your worst hand or your best hand, or you try to do both. And you have 7 cards, and so you make a collection of 5 of those 7. And if you go to do both, you can mix up your cards to do one in the low and then one at the high. And at the end, you put out your hand, and you either have no chips in your hand if you want to go low, or 1 chip if you want to go high, or 2 chips if you want to do both. And if anybody ever put out 2 chips, everyone's, oh, no, you're not going to make it. And my dad always would try to do both, and almost always got it, and it was always very, very impressive. And I bring up this story. I wanted to talk a little bit about my dad's ability to teach well and his good strategic vision, but also because my dad would always think about things strategically on many levels. And before card games that I would play in, my dad would always say, you know, always remember the primary goal is to connect with other people at the card game table, that to have a good time. I mean, try to win the game as well, but, try to think about that as well. And so when I think about my career, and I think about just my life in general, to think about making sure that everybody is achieving their objectives as I try to achieve mine, and just trying to build a sense of community and peace, it just really works very successfully. And, throughout life, you're dealt hands that can be, not good and good, and my dad has always been very good at teaching me how to play the cards that have been dealt to me. So it's just been a great lifelong learning process for me. And when I think about the legacy that you leave behind, I hope to teach this on to my kids and everybody that's around me. Thank you.
Well, before I get started, I will say that that sense of community when Damien and I played against each other was not there. He was vicious, vicious. I never won a game that we played against each other. He'd always be like, you know, we're playing Monopoly. You want to give me those properties. They'll be good for you in the long run. It never was. Well, my name is Aubrey Conover, and I appreciate, again, all of you all being here and helping us celebrate. I do want to thank the university for helping us put this together. It is just a really wonderful event, and want to recognize both Laura and Shoshana for being so supportive of this endeavor. So we really do appreciate that. So the other person I want to thank, and I'll just do it briefly, is my mom for all she does for our family. So thank you so much. So there are two different stories that I wanted to share that I thought would be kind of fun to talk about my dad and its intersections with the department. And the first is, so when I was growing up, I was not the most responsible student. It's hard to imagine now as I work with students every day and I try and coax them on what they should do. And I just hope they never asked what I did or look at my undergrad grades. But in high school, I had a really bad reputation for forgetting things. You know, my gym shoes, shorts, shirt, book, writing assignment, permission slip, you name it, I would forget it. And so pretty much every other day, I'd find myself in class first period and think to myself, oh, I really probably need my shoes for gym class or for basketball practice. And I'd make my way down to the office and call my dad's office, and he knew it was coming. He'd be like, hello, and I'd be like, hey, Dad, it's me. He's like, what did you forget? And, you know, I'd tell him, and he'd be like, well, you know, I'm teaching class in 20 minutes, and then after that, I'll zoom home, and I'll grab it, and I'll bring it to the high school. He never gave me a hard time. You know, I knew it was a challenge, but it was just, he was always there when we needed it, so I really appreciate that. The other fun one is my senior year of high school, I got to take a class here at the university. I got to take Intro to Television Production, and it was a lot of fun being on the college campus and just being out of the high school environment. But one of the cool things was that halfway through our class, we got to get partnered up for a full semester project, and this was the big end of the year project. And I was thinking to myself, as an 18-year-old guy, I was like, oh, cool. Here's the chance for my dad to set me up with one of these attractive young ladies in the class, and, you know, I'm going to be all cool and suave. Yeah. No, that did not happen. My dad instead decided to set me up with a partner who was probably the most talented guy in the class, and he and I worked together for the rest of the semester and put together a production that I will always be proud of, and it was just a very cool experience. And so, you know, it was just an opportunity to show that my dad always taught by sharing examples and kind of leading the way, and was always there for us, and I will be always grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, when Peter first came to Whitewater back in 1972, he also had an interview at, I believe it's the University of Northern Arizona in Flagstaff, and he was coming over from California, and he stopped there, and he was interviewed there. And I believe it was for a radio job there at the university. Oh, radio and television. And one of the questions that they asked Peter at that time was, should students have a voice in what goes out over the air? And Peter said, well, yes, they should. And that was not the answer that Northern Arizona wanted. And so the interview pretty much just ended right then and there. And Peter came on over to Whitewater and interviewed, and we were more student-centered, and that matched the way that Peter felt at the time and the way that he spent the rest of his career as very much a student-centered professor. But not only that, he's a wonderful, wonderful colleague, a great friend. I want to introduce the man of the hour, Peter Conover.
look up for a second so you can see people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This entire event was a considerable surprise to me when it happened. I had no expectation that Aubrey and Damien might be planning something, but they were very kind and thoughtful in their efforts towards me. I can't recognize all the people by name that helped us to let this program go forward. There really were quite a few people, and for a while they were talking about 500, and that was far too many cookies to debate the night before. So I wish to thank the two deans that have been so instrumental in my life and in the success of the program service. So our new dean is here. I want to welcome him.
Yeah.
Do I have it written down? And that's Mark McPhail.
Mark McPhail and John Tyre.
Right. Thank you. As you know, I'm bouncing a bit, so please help me as necessary. And I also want to thank Dick Haven, who's worked conscientiously with the cable service, allowed us to explore many of the things that we were capable of doing. And it was his idea and vision that allowed us to go forward on those. So thank you, Dick, for that effort. Yes. And perhaps most important, particularly in our efforts to manage the relationship between residence life and the communication department, is Jerry Gorby. Jerry Gorby's vision allowed us to do things that other schools in the system, other schools in the state have not been able to do. And that's to work together to honor our students and honor the programs and ideas that they bring to us. So I especially want to thank Jerry for his vision and his willingness to work with me over the years. I want to thank the planning committee for this, and though it goes along with my cookies, I particularly want to thank Tracy, Allie, Katie, and others who worked so conscientiously to make this program well and set up this tent, at least with the help of General Services.
We'll take one. Yeah, David forgot that.
Third, I want to thank my colleagues that worked on this program and have worked with me over the year for specialized programming and various opportunities. I heard Terry's name. I wasn't able to get in touch with him early, but if he's here, I'd like to thank you, Terry. Where are you?
There he is.
There's the man that allowed us to get going, who was open to alternative visions and could protect me from anybody who didn't want those ideas to go forward. I want to, let me see here. Okay, I want to acknowledge former students. And again, we have so many great students here today in terms of thanking them, but I did see Brian Alberth in the audience. Brian has helped this program considerably, and to have him come back to campus is a real honor, and we thank you, Brian. Okay, I certainly want to give thanks again to the students I've worked with, to the faculty that have encouraged me, and to others on campus that have made this a very positive program for many to benefit. Thank you again, and thank you for these moments.
Keep going. Do you want to talk with us?
I want to just make a couple of final comments before I close off. And that's been working with the cable television service so that our students could benefit and creating a range of programming. We've had very creative staff to work with over the years and certainly wish them the best. Jeff Kohlmeyer has been with us for almost the full time I have been here, and I certainly want to thank him for that effort.
And Greg Marty.
And Greg Marty. How could I forget Greg? Greg has done so much for us in terms of keeping the technology in this system functioning. And you know we're driven by technology, so many thanks to Greg and to others.
You want to try and tackle all of this?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
So you doing okay? Thank you.
Well, I hope, first of all, that a few of you will stay around. It's been very interesting taking a look at how you've changed. 25. I have not changed. So please know that. It's great to see those faces, and I hope they'll stick around for a while so we could chat and talk about things that were particularly lots of fun to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If everyone would be seated, we have just another little important part of this whole program. First of all, if you have not been inside the studios, please, take a tour and see all the different equipment that we have, all the area we have, but especially see the studio, which is going to be named. We're going to have the unveiling here on the screen in just a few moments, where it will be named the Conover Studio. But while Aubrey and Damien have gone in there, I would just like to give you the opportunity to maybe say something that you remember about Peter or a story. So if anybody'd like to say anything, please just raise your hand.
Okay. This isn't exactly fair because I helped plan it, so I knew this part was coming. So over the last couple of days, I was kind of thinking about what I would say when I got to the sharing the mic thing. And there were two things I thought of. One was when I was in my undergrad, Dr. Conover was getting towards the end of his teaching career, and so I didn't really get the chance to have him as a professor. But I did work with him a lot through UWW-TV, through working with the news. And one thing I remember in particular, which was invaluable to me, was in my senior year. I was producer for the news program, and my Tuesday night producer and I wanted to take on the task of redoing the news set. And it had to get approved by Peter, and he was all for it. Like, there was nothing holding us back. And I just think back of that because it was one of the first really big projects that I was a part of that gave me the confidence to feel like I knew what I was doing. So I wanted to say thank you for that. The other thing, one more thing, is that on Friday I was coming back to try and get set up for the event today to make sure the tent was okay. And I happened to walk into the studio, and there I saw 4 or 5 techs sitting around in the studio playing Settlers of Catan. And this was the day before graduation, and almost all of them were graduating. And I just thought to myself that really says something about the program. The fact that we have people who are on their way out the door, and the very last thing that they do is come back to the TV studio because they love it that much. And I have to say that that is a heck of a legacy. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to share a comment? Oh, just right back here.
Allie and I were very close in graduation dates, so we had some of our college experiences with the TV station together and working on different things together, but just kind of along the lines of what she's talking about as far as how inspirational Dr. Conover was throughout the college experience and encouraging you to think outside the box and, you know, really follow your dreams and build your future. I was trying to figure out an internship versus another class, and I went to him and I said, you know, I'm loving doing news and I'm loving doing sports, and I was working at the TV station for a tech, probably about 2 years at that point. And I said I'd really like to do an internship as a wedding videographer rather than doing sports or news, because that seemed to be a lot of what I was finding as far as internship opportunities. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about the program is how creative it allowed me to be as an individual and to really think out my future and build that for myself. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that kind of encouragement. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Liddy Collins, class of 1975. I had him when he was beginning his career. But we continued through the years, because I would call him when I'm having a problem, and I would call Dr. Conover and he would see me through. So he mentored me through the years. I'm a producer at Milwaukee Public Television, and I have requested his and called for his advice many times.
Peter's heard me tell this story before, so he probably doesn't want to hear it again. But I just always think that it is the perfect description of Peter. So he was on his way to lunch, and usually he had like 15 minutes. And so when Peter had his coat on and he was headed down the hall, you knew not to stop him because, you know, he was on a mission. So another student was, the assignment was to, we had to do a how-to video that we were going to produce in the studio. And the gentleman that was to be my partner had decided that we should butcher a deer for our video project. Well, I just really wasn't on board with this idea, but he was sure that Peter, being a guy, I guess, would back him up. So I said, you go ahead and ask Peter about this. And he caught Peter as Peter was on his way down the hall to lunch. And he said, Dr. Conover, what would you think if for my project I butchered a deer in the studio? And now, you know, he caught him unawares. And so Peter said, I think that would be totally gross, disgusting, and uncalled for. Much, you know, certainly nothing you would normally expect to hear from Peter. And so then he turned and took 3 steps and stopped and turned around and said, but if you're really committed to this project, we can revisit it.
I'm Nobuko Shuru, and I'm Japanese. I was a foreign student for the graduate school. So I was in a master's program. And I was not speaking English at all, and I could not understand what's going on. And so probably I was a huge burden for him. But he was always patient, took time for me, spent extra time for me to understand a lot of things. And he was very generous with the time and energy. And thanks to him, I was able to get through all my international studies in a master's degree. And I was able to get an interesting job, and I'm now running an international department for General Electric Medical Systems. Now we call healthcare system, but I learned most crucial skills from him: be patient, be caring, and be generous. And with that, I've been able to enjoy my career, and I've been able to make so many great, wonderful friends from all over the world. So I really thank Dr. Conover.
Hi, my name is Jim Schlu. I'm class of '86, radio, TV, film major. I am very, very grateful for everything Dr. Conover's done for me. And while I was in the major, I extremely grateful. And one gift of the heart that Dr. Conover shared with us was his dog and lovebird Whizzle. I will never forget it. You've never known joy in your life till a lovebird lands on your head and kind of sits there for a while and then starts combing your hair with its beak. Until you've known that experience, you've never really lived. This was Whizzle was Dr. Conover's very own imprinted lovebird, and I will never forget that. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Ryan Mills, and I was in the class of '95. I actually met Dr. Conover long before I started here in 1991. I don't want to embarrass the person, but I had started an internship in Janesville with a cable company with someone else who had Dr. Conover as a teacher. And it was great because, a couple times we rented the studio up here to shoot a commercial. And I remember we came up here, and Dr. Conover was the first person I saw up here. So I'm 16, 17 years old, and we walk in the studio, and he introduced himself and said, here's where you're gonna be working, and if you have any questions, come find me. And I kept thinking, doesn't he have other students he has to go watch? He's just paying attention to me. And I was amazed by that. And before we left, I remember him saying, are you thinking of coming to school here ever, just out of curiosity? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm going to look forward to seeing you in a couple of years. And I thought, okay, he probably says that to everybody. And then I started here, and I started off working at the radio station because I had worked in TV for a little bit. I'm like, we'll do that too. But I had a lot of friends who did both. And they said, come on down. And I walked in the door, and it had been probably 2 years by that point. And he saw me, and he's like, Ryan, it's good to see you again. I'm thinking, wow, he actually remembers me. And then when I showed up for the first day of class, and I remember we took an intro to cinema class, and he said hello to me there. It was great because it just felt like he actually cared. And I had that experience with all of Whitewater. The entire communication department was great. Between Dr. Tremblay, who also sometimes encouraged me to spend a little bit more time with the TV station too. And I think I bugged him a little bit too much up at the radio station. But it was a great experience. And I went on. I had the opportunities to work at Channel 3 in Madison for a while, and several people I worked with said, "Oh, that's Dr. Conover teaches there, right?" They didn't even attend school here, but they had enough students that he had taught come through that they knew who he was. So I just want to thank him. Thank you very much for that, because I learned so much, and it still helps me today.
Okay. Without further ado, I'm hoping we can get a message in to Aubrey and Damien. We will now dedicate the Conover Studio.
Thank you all. Wonderful stories and a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out today to help honor our colleague and friend, Peter Conover. And we have refreshments inside, so please come in and have some refreshments and tour the studio and chat for a while.